direct conversation, some deep reactions, please. All this comics narration ain't late me. A little more talk, a lot less read. A little fight, baby, is what I need. Close the trade, open up your brains. Explain it to me. Explain it to me, baby. Explain it to me.
Thank you, Vandello, and welcome once again to Rhett Conversations. My name is Josh Wasta, a.k.a. Fallout Fieri. And with me, my partner in crime, who will tell you, don't ever throw away your miracle. Don't let it slip away. Nothing should matter. It's Professor L, Leia Cameron.
Hello.
We're doing some deep cuts for some 90s songs.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah.
That was a little Miracle
Very
by Whitney Houston.
Today's episode.
Yeah, that was Whitney Houston right there. And our guest today, friend of the show, Mr. JR Cillian Green is here. Hello, sir.
Hello.
So glad to have you here. Oh,
yep.
Yes.
Well, as we record this, it is Halloween Day. So
it's Halloween Day.
Right after this. Oh, yes, and of course we are being audited by the lovely and talented the Baronessa, Miss Jennifer Howland.
Yo!
Who, right after this show, we are going to decorate our front porch to give away comic books and dress as the Addams Family and eat off of a charcuterie board and drink wine and be just lavish as fuck.
That sounds lovely.
You know, it's just another Sunday.
Yes, just another day. Help children with candy. Yell at them to read comic books.
And then once they have comic books in their hands, tell them to get off our lawn.
That's right. Fine, go, you've stayed your hour.
Well, one comic book I would not encourage children to read is the topic of today's program, Mr. Miracle.
That's very true.
Not advised for children. I would not give this to a child.
Great comic, fantastic sex scenes.
Yeah.
So, for people just joining us, this is how this program will go. Mr. JR is here to have Professor L explain to him the entirety of Mr. Miracle by Tom King. He has never read it. And so basically throughout this, we're going to fill him in on everything. But the hope is that he will be so interested by the end that he and you, the listener, will have to go out and get it right away and read it cover to cover to pick up on any of the things that Leia or I have missed. JR has the power to emergency break the entire show at any point, stop it dead in its tracks and ask any question he wants. It could be, who is that character? It could be, could I get a little more frame of reference on that? And more often than not in this, it'll be, what the ever-loving fuck? And so at that point, it is my job as the second instructor to answer his questions. We'll see. As we'll get into, I'm not a DC person, really. This whole thing was brand new to me. This is the first time I had read it. So I may actually depend on, since we have our peanut gallery, Jennifer's here, I may depend on her, if Leia can't answer the question, then to just make something up.
Woohoo!
Which has been great success in past shows.
It's true.
So if there are no further questions, Professor L, the floor is yours.
All right. So before we even begin this, just to get this out of the way, this is the first time I think I've ever had to do this, but content warning for childhood abuse, for suicide, for there's a lot going on in here. So if you are not comfortable with these topics, no harm, no foul. You can skip this one because this is a pretty loaded book and a very loaded story. There's also heavy religious overtones, which is very interesting. So that being said, this is Mr. Miracle by Tom King. This was at the end of 2009. A bunch of people asked me what I thought the best comic book of the I'm sorry, not 2009, 2010 or 2019. End of 2019, people asked me what I thought the best comic book series of the decade was, and I said this one, hands down. And I'm not a DC person.
But Leia, just to point it out, 1980 was 20 years ago, so I'm not sure
This
how
is
it
true.
could have been 2019.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. Yeah, I don't like to think about that. Moving on. But this was my pick of the 2010s, basically, and not being a DC person, that holds a lot of weight. And I hope that by doing this, everybody will go out and pick up a copy for themselves, because it really is a masterpiece. And there's going to be some things that I just kind of skip over or gloss over a little bit, because it's either kind of irrelevant to the story or is fighting. But even then, the artwork is incredible, and the way this story is told visually is something that I don't think anybody should miss. So there's going to be some things that I just don't mention in terms of the artwork that are relevant to this story, that you'll just have to see for yourselves. So that being said, all that out of the way, we open up on a sort of brief retelling of who this character is and how he came to be. Basically, years ago, the old gods died. And when the old gods died, two different planets were formed, equal in power, but very different. The planet called New Genesis is basically the good planet. It's ruled by the kind and gracious High Father. They're all good folks. They're all normal people. And then we have the hellscape of Apocalypse. And this is Darkseid's planet. These two planets are completely, basically opposites of each other. Darkseid, which is a common theme, seeks to find what's called the anti-life equation. And the anti-life equation is pretty much exactly what it sounds like on the tin.
Max,
look
around you.
Yeah. So he wants to find this so that he can have essentially unlimited power and rule over everything. So these two planets go to war, and it is a very long, ceaseless war, between good and evil, basically. So this war finally kind of comes to a head when there's a ceasefire, contingent upon the exchange of children. Darkseid and the High Father would exchange their two sons. So Darkseid would raise the son of the High Father, and the High Father would raise the son of Darkseid. So that's what happens there. The boy who is raised by the High Father, his name is Orion, and the boy that is raised by Darkseid, who is the son of the High Father, is scot-free.
Question.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, first off, that feels like a very bad idea. And just in general.
Well, I feel that following the practices of medieval fiefdoms, nothing ever goes wrong with that.
I mean, nothing ever goes wrong, especially when supernatural things are involved. Is this one of those like nature versus nurture kind of experiences?
Yes.
Or is okay? All right.
Yes.
Well, I'll just go back to the corner I was in.
Also, with a ton of religion thrown in.
Well, you brought the theologian into this one, and I feel like this was purposeful. All right.
The theologian and the therapist, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that you, I, and Josh will need therapy over by the time that we are done with this book.
Great. Oh, so good. Yes, the theologian and the therapist.
Everybody in this book also needs therapy very badly.
Yes. Yes. Very much so. Doc Samson is not a character in the DC universe. However, he is already busy in the Marvel universe. Counseling everyone.
Yeah, if I could get a job doing this, I probably wouldn't. If I could get a job being the counselor to superheroes, I probably wouldn't. But
yeah, for more on that, see The Boys.
So, the only other thing that you really need to know about, well, there's two more things that you really need to know about this whole deal, is that the High Father tells Orion that there was a prophecy that one day the son of Darkseid would kill Darkseid. Meanwhile, in Apocalypse, Scott Free is basically trained and raised up to be a warrior by this character called Granny Goodness, which is a very ironic name. She's the opposite of that. But so he tries again and again to escape Apocalypse. He's very literally being abused every single day in this hellscape. And he tries to escape so many times that's how he gets the name Scott Free. Granny Goodness gives him that name.
Yeah, important to note here that the Highfather purposefully, since he knew he was giving up his child, just didn't give him a name.
Yeah, he did not give him a name. He was just like, all right, kiddo, good luck out there. And
okay, so all right, that's okay. All right,
yeah,
that's a
Get
lot.
fucked, Child X.
yeah,
Really, that's all right. My therapist brain is kicking in, and I'm like, so all right, no mirroring and no twinship, fun times. He's not going to come out very screwed up. So
no, trauma after trauma after trauma. Yeah.
All right, continue on.
All right. So, while he is in Apocalypse, he meets a young woman named Big Barda. Big Barda is, falls in love with him, and Scott Free eventually manages to escape Apocalypse. He gets out of Apocalypse. He goes to Earth. He befriends an escape artist in a circus called Mr. Miracle. Mr. Miracle, the first, was murdered, and Scott basically assumes his identity and becomes a super escape artist. He marries Big Barda. They live together, and he builds his new family on Earth. And then, so this is how we open issue 1. We open issue 1 with Scott slitting his wrists. And
issue 1, you say? Like
issue
yes.
1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it gives you this overview of basically there are these two worlds, blah, blah, blah. They escaped. He and Big Barda get married, and he becomes Mr. Miracle. Like, all in like an exposition dump. And then, boom, slits his wrists.
That is how we see our first real image of Mr. Miracle. The second page, and so there's going to be a couple of little parables, I guess, that are going to be important to the rest of the story. So I will read them verbatim so that you can kind of hold that in your mind. It seems to be a memory or a vision, or it's not quite clear, of a young boy. And it says, the teacher says to the whole class, draw whatever you want. When they're done, the teacher asks them what they've drawn, and the children say dinosaurs, hearts, superheroes, anything. It doesn't matter. Then one child says, I drew God. And the teacher says, that's very nice, but no one knows what God looks like. And the child, without a second's hesitation, says, yeah, until now. So we cut over now to a sort of montage of Scott being taken in an ambulance to the hospital. Big Barda, of course, crying, frantic, trying to take care of him. And, he's hooked up to monitors, and he's just kind of laying motionlessly in a hospital bed. He's released from the hospital. Of course, there's a bunch of reporters asking him all kinds of questions and whatnot. And it's very disjointed. It's a lot of flashes of the aftermath of this suicide attempt, right? And you start to get little panels in here every once in a while, and I won't count all of them. The number isn't important, but little panels every maybe 5-6 panels is just a black panel that says Darkseid is. This is also very important. Scott is then visited by Orion, who teleports into the condo that him and Barda share. And Orion says, stand, Scott free. And Scott replies, fine, standing. And Orion punches him, knocks him to the ground, and then says, stand. And this repeats for a little while. So the refrain of stand, standing, punch, stand, standing, punch. And Barda wakes up. They're both asleep, but they were both asleep on the couch. Barda finally wakes up, asks him what the hell he thinks he's doing. And Orion replies, "I'm teaching." And Barda freaks out. Barda was also raised in Apocalypse. And she basically tells him to fuck off, that he can't teach them anything. They were raised in Apocalypse, in the pits. They know what the hell teaching is. He's not good at it. So Orion leaves. And he uses something called a mother box to do so. And the mother box is basically like a combination cell phone teleporter. Basically, it looks like kind of like a cell phone on steroids. It's kind of hard to explain, but it does everything pretty much. Yeah. And when Barda goes to Scott, and Scott's got his face is messed up, he's bleeding. Barda tries to comfort him, and Scott tries to interrupt her and tells her that her eyes aren't blue, they're brown. Why are they brown? And Barda's very confused, and she's like, "Don't be crazy, they've always been brown. What are you talking about?"
Some Berenstain Bears shit.
Yeah. And that scene ends. We cut over to a dream sequence, and in this dream sequence, Mr. Miracle Scott is being interviewed by a late night television talk show host. And the talk show host asks him why he killed himself, without saying it in so many words. He's like, we know you tried something new. We might want to address it. And Scott says, it's important for people to know, it was just a trick. It was just a trick. I'd been doing so many escapes that, I finally thought, what can't I escape from? It was getting easier and easier. And what can't I escape from? What doesn't anybody escape from? Death. They can't escape death. So I killed myself. And the audience applauds and cheers and laughs. And the talk show host then asks, well, that leaves only one question. Did you really escape? Did you really escape death? Did you escape death? And before Scott can answer, they quote unquote cut to commercial. And that's that. So this is kind of the central theme of the whole story. If you can escape anything, can you escape death? And what does that mean? Escaping death, especially in this context. So we cut to a kind of flashback where Scott is talking to Highfather, to his real dad, his biological dad. And they are discussing the anti-life equation. And Scott finds out that Darkseid actually has the anti-life equation. And with this equation, he will be able to change reality. And Scott basically needs to do something about it. When this flashback is concluded, Scott is backstage in a studio, and he's with his old partner Orion, who was the partner of the former Mr. Miracle, the human one that was killed. And he gives him a pair of handcuffs that supposedly are impossible to break out of. While he's putting his handcuffs on Scott, he repeats the story that I told earlier about the kid and no one knows what God looks like. And as he finishes the story, there's a knock at the door, and it's Barda. And she comes in, she's like, I don't like you being alone in here. And he was like, what are you talking about? There's, Orion's here, he gave me some handcuffs, I got him off really easy, like everything's fine. And Barda is kind of floored by this. Barda's like, what the hell, are you okay? Like, what is happening? And it turns out that he's been dead for a month. Scott actually was the person who chose to essentially pull the plug on him. There was, he had cancer, he was suffering, and, you pulled the plug on him. What are you talking about? But Scott insists that he's there. And Barda's like, no, there's literally nobody here. You're by yourself.
So you're saying that Orion's been dead for a month?
No,
yes.
Not Orion. The previous
Oberon.
Mr. Miracle. Oberon.
Oberon. Yeah.
Oh, the previous Mr. Miracle has been dead for a month, and now
No. Oberon was his partner.
So Oberon was the one that gave him handcuffs and la. This is Bernie Clifton's dressing room.
Yes.
Yeah. Very, very, very similar to that. Yes.
Okay, for those of you out there who have no idea what I'm talking about, it is an Inside Number 9 episode, which I would recommend everyone watching all of Inside Number 9. But if you want to be sad, you watch that and the 12 Days of Christine, which Leia can tell you fucked her up. So there we go.
It's true, it did. So this is also kind of interspersed with like the present day, where Scott gets a message on his mother box from Orion saying that the High Father, his father, is now dead. Darkseid has killed him. He's taken control of New Genesis, and they're organizing a resistance. So Scott and Barda set off. They go off to basically be generals in this war. But before they leave, Scott, as the portal is opening up, Scott takes this time to tell Barda that something is wrong. He can't put his finger on it, but everything is wrong with him. And she's like, what are you talking about? We got to go do this. We don't have time for this. You're the son of the High Father. You're the heir to his throne. We gotta get going. And he's trying to tell her that he's having essentially a mental breakdown. And he doesn't know how to escape it. This is something he doesn't know how to escape, and he doesn't think he can escape it. So Barda slaps the shit out of him and says, stand. And he replies, standing, gets back up. And she's like, all right, great, let's go. And they leave. So that that repetitive cycle happens again, but this time not with Orion smacking him down, but with his wife.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And in response to him saying, I'm having some severe psychological problems and we really need to address it.
And yeah. All right. So this is, so it feels very would you kindly, but
yes. It
does.
It's
that's actually kind of apt. But it's very much, it's that kind of call and response is part of their training.
Yeah.
Or was part of their training in Apocalypse was, you stand, you get hit. You stand back up, you get hit again, but you always stand up. You always stand up.
Yeah, this is the core theme throughout Granny Goodness's training. However, you will also find out other training things that they will mention throughout. But at the end of it, this is always the core lesson in Granny Goodness's stuff: is no matter what I do to you, you will get back up.
Right.
Okay. All right. I'm okay. Right.
Because essentially they are, for better or worse, essentially they are being trained to be warriors. Warriors get back up. So they do go to war. They fight. They kill some people. And they meet up with Orion, who is now has taken the place of the new High Father. This is interesting because really this is Scott's place. This isn't his place, but he has taken it. And Orion makes them kneel in front of him, which the previous High Father has never done. It is pretty clear immediately that Orion's going to be a real douchebag about all of this. And he lets them know that while Scott and Barda's armies have been doing well, Darkseid's forces have killed over 250,000 troops and 7 of what they call their brother gods, because these are the new gods. The reason that Darkseid's armies have been so successful is because their field commander is none other than Granny Goodness. So they have decided essentially to pull in Scott and Barda to go kill her directly, because they know that they have beef with her. We cut over to Barda and Scott sleeping, and while they are sleeping, I don't even know how to explain this character, but his name may give you some clues because you are a theologian. His name is Metron. And Metron appears to Scott in his sleep and says, Scott Free, you are not to know the face of God. Do you understand, Scott Free? You are not to know the face of God. And Scott's response to this is kind of to roll over in bed and be like, hey, Barda, Metron's here. Tell him it's late. We got to go. We got to be up early. And he just goes back to sleep. Something that's outstanding about this book is that even though it deals with very, very serious and deep topics, the comedic beats in here are just chef kiss. And so yeah, basically the voice of God has come to them to tell them not to know the face of God, and he's like, oh, just come back later, you know. So they teleport over to Granny Goodness the next day, and as they're heading out, Scott and Barda are talking about her, and he asked Barda if she ever liked her, and he remembers a time that he was essentially hanging in a place called the Judas Cradle as a child for days because he spilled his milk. And he was supposed to be in there longer, but she came in early and took him out and held him. And so he's kind of uncertain because that was good, right? That was nice. Maybe she isn't all bad. And Barda was like, no, I've never liked her. She hurt us.
I didn't have
So you can kind of
syndrome bullshit.
Right. But you can kind of see like again, you know, with the conflicting emotions of childhood trauma, be like, well, you know, she did hit me a lot, but there was that one time that she hugged me, you know, so that again is going to be a theme throughout this. So they transport over to the battlefield where Granny Goodness is, and she of course greets them like her two long lost children. You know, oh, look at you, you're so grown up, you know, whatever. And this kind of almost mollifies them for a second. They kind of don't know what to do with this. And she invites them in for Jello into her tent. And when they get in there, they see that she has captured one of the gods and is starving him to death. And they are eating directly in front of him. And of course, Granny recounts a adorable childhood tale of the time that she deprived Barda of water for 2 weeks, and you know, oh my goodness, how you screamed and cried. But you know, you were already 4. You were a big girl. You know, you would have been fine. You were fine.
So she's a real peach.
Oh yes,
yeah. She's wonderful.
By the way, I of course, being the academic that I am, had to look up what a Judas Cradle is. This is a thing in the real world.
Okay.
A Judas Cradle is a purported torture device by which the suspended victim's orifice was slowly impaled on and stretched by the pyramidal tip of the seat.
Oh no!
That makes it so much worse.
All right. Well, I'm glad to have been here to. It was wooden, as a matter of fact. So just
thanks for coming, kids.
Yeah.
Hope you all had a wonderful time. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Angels to some, devils to others. You know, the whole 9 yards. All right. So
that made it a lot darker.
Thanks, JR. You made it worse.
I'm so glad. That's my job, isn't it? That's my job. Isn't that my job on this show, to make it worse? Okay, I'm gonna go back. Continue.
All right. Well, there's going to be some other references to things that I thought previously were just an invention of the comic books, and so, long story short, Granny asks if Metron visited Scott last night, and he said, yes, you know, but I thought it was a dream. And she said, well, there's so much more you need to know. Orion contacted me this morning and told her that that Scott and Barda were coming and that they intend to kill her. So he double crosses them. The prophecy is kind of what is compelling everyone to act this way. The prophecy that Darkseid's son would kill is the only person that could kill Darkseid, and that would be Orion, right? And Granny replies, well, is he, Scott? Is he, or are you? And in response, Scott kills her. They leave.
Scott doesn't kill her. Barda does.
I'm sorry, Barda kills. Yes.
That's
Barda
important later.
Yes. And so yes, Barda kills him. They leave. Scott, meanwhile, is really struggling. There's clearly something not right with him. And the next part of the story, I'm not going to read the whole story, but it talks about how essentially there was a Christmas story that Granny Goodness used to tell Scott about essentially some people that were killed in the Holocaust. Not a Christmas story at all. And again, this kind of exemplifies what the kind of person that Granny Goodness was and how they were raised. Like that's your Christmas story, is a story about a family that was killed by the Nazis in the Holocaust. So not super happy, not great.
Unless it makes you uncomfortable, I think I can sum up that story in about a minute, and I do think it's pretty important to the narrative, because it's comparing a religious thing with what we do to children.
That's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine. Go ahead.
So it's in the Netherlands during the Nazi occupation, and there's a 5-year-old kid, and he's learning about Jesus and Joseph and Mary going around, and how there was no room anywhere except at a in a stable. And the teacher mentions that they were Jews, and this 5-year-old kid says, "Oh, well, then they could have stayed in our basement." Nazis show up, find a Jewish family in their basement, kill the dad, send the kids and the mother to camps. One sister dies, kid is separated, and basically ends up dying not of the gas in the concentration camp, but of all the people piled on top of him trying to escape the gas. So, and
this
then
is a real pleasant story. I mean, this is a real pleasant comic.
Well, and the point is that Granny Goodness would always end that story that she told repeatedly with "Merry Christmas." So when horrible things happen throughout this comic, every once in a while, Scott will just say "Merry Christmas."
This is a real upper. Continue on.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but it to me, it also very much showed, I mean, because the story is essentially about how even the Nazis that were still teaching that Jesus was Jewish, and they were all Christian, but to save Jews in the present day, or in the, that present day, meant execution. And it's a very enlightening thing, or it was to me, on Granny Goodness did not see did not acknowledge how weird that was dynamically, but Scott absolutely gets it. Or Granny Goodness was telling that story to show the weirdness there.
Right.
Anyway, I did want to make sure that we approach that story because I found it important to understand what happens moving forward.
No, and you did a great summation of it. So that was very well done. Thank you. I will admit that I kind of skimmed over that part. I've read this a couple times, and I always kind of skim over that part because it makes me a little uncomfortable. But I understand exactly why.
Totally understand. Yeah.
So Scott is in his living room, and he's being met with the general of the bugs, whose name is Forager. I need to point out that the bugs are not bugs like real bugs. That's just their name. They're humanoid looking things, but they are not actual bugs.
They're foot soldiers. They're grunts.
Yeah. And Orion lets him know that he would prefer to follow Scott into battle, because Orion doesn't seem to understand that there are limits. The queen of the bugs was executed for treason, and her head is hanging next to Granny's. And they will no longer follow Orion in the war. They will follow him wherever they will take him. As he finishes this sentence, a character called Lightbringer kind of portals into the room and straight up disintegrates him, by orders of the High Father, by orders of Orion, for being a traitor. And so Lightray is Orion's right hand for the most part. And he lets Scott know that the bug was not specifically instructed not to speak to him. Those were the consequences. And Scott asks, "Well, yeah, but is that true?" And Lightbringer says, "Don't be stupid," and leaves. And that's when Scott says, "Merry Christmas." So he gets into bed next to Barda and lets her know that, hey, you missed Forager and Lightray. And they're cuddling together. And then in the middle, so this is the way the structure of the story is set out in 9-panel grids. The entire structure is 9-panel, 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 9-panel. So in the middle of this 9 panel, there is again the dark side is, which Scott then repeats out loud to Barda and says, everyone says that, but what does it mean? I bet it doesn't mean anything, and people just think it sounds cool.
Very 90s kid of him.
Right. So we get to, we cut away to a series of panels that illustrate one of Scott's amazing escapes. This will happen a couple times in the story. In this particular case, he is climbing into a wooden crate that has been suspended from like some type of bridge or crane or something of that nature in the air. And on the count of 3, the crate is released, smashes to the ground. And of course, Scott isn't in there. Scott and Barda are eating lunch and
nice cafe. Just
a nice
You
cafe.
know.
And she lets him know that Orion wants him to, wants both of them to come back early, and that he called while he was performing, except that Scott insists that he wasn't performing. He was actually escaping. It's not a trick. He was actually escaping. This is also important too.
Also important to note that it never shows how he escapes anything. Right. You're seeing it from the audience's point of view every time.
Yep. Yeah. So you don't ever see any of his escapes from his point of view. So as they're talking, Scott tries to tell Barda again that there's something wrong with him. And she initially thinks that he's referring to his suicide attempt and like why he committed suicide or tried to commit suicide. And he said, it's not about what I did. I was trying to escape. And sometimes I don't know what's real. This is also very, very important. And, she kind of is cavalier about it and was like, well, that's easy, darling. I'm real. And then their lunch is interrupted by a bunch of fans who want a selfie. And that conversation kind of grinds to it kind of grinds to a halt. It's not
I like
addressed.
To state that I don't trust her now.
JR, if I were to tell you that I was real, would you not trust me?
Probably not. If out of nowhere you're like, but I'm real, I'd be like, what happened? And where am I? And I need to get out. Like that's.
So we now cut over to the introduction of Funky Flashman. Funky Flashman, it's very important to note that in this particular comic, Funky Flashman is basically a satirical equivalent to Stan Lee.
Yep.
Mr. Miracle was designed and written by Jack Kirby, and if you know anything at all about the contentious history between those two, and the kind of contentious background of Stan Lee, Tom King specifically put this character in to just rip Stan Lee a new one.
Yep.
And it will become clear. There will be a couple beats that I will touch on as we go that will kind of point that out. But that's kind of what you need to know, is that this is basically an ostentatious, jazzed up version of Stan Lee. So he introduces Scott Free to Orion, like announces him and his entrance into the room. And Orion asks everybody to leave and he will talk to Scott alone. And Scott tells Orion that his father had told him that Darkseid has the anti-life equation, and he suspects that the anti-life equation may be inside of him, and maybe that's what made him attempt suicide. And he wants to know if Orion knows about this, or if it's also inside of Orion too, that if he's been infected with this anti-life equation. And Orion replies with, "Have you ever seen the face of God?" And punches him right in the face. And he just starts kicking the shit out of Scott and is like, "I asked you a question, answer the question. Didn't you hear me? Have you ever seen the face of God?" And as he finally gets to the point where he essentially like grinds Scott's face into the ground with a boot, he tells Scott, I have witnessed the divine. It helped me, and it will help you." And he refers to Scott as his brother. And Scott replies that he isn't his brother. He takes off his helmet and says, "See me, This is the face of God. And this just kind of repeats over and over again. And the panels get glitchier and glitchier and glitchier until they become almost like completely distorted. And that's how that issue ends. So we now cut over at the beginning of the next issue to Scott, again, recovering in his bed. And Barda is at his bedside. And Barda basically wants, she's sitting there, and there's a knock at the door, and Barda goes over to answer it, and she tells him to go to hell. But it's Light Ray, and Light Ray is there with an official decree from the High Father. So Scott gets up, gets dressed, and meets up with Light Ray in the living room, and Light Ray tells him that Orion has now declared that Scott Free is an agent of Darkseid and an enemy of the free and proud people of New Genesis. Barda's response to this is to slap him upside the head, and Scott's response to this is to pour himself a cup of coffee. It is also important to note that the coffee mug that Scott's drinking out of simply says on it, "I am God." This mug actually makes an appearance a couple times throughout the course of the series.
Yep.
And Barda's upset. Barda's pissed. Barda wants Light Ray to get the fuck out. And Scott is very casual about this. He tells them that the General Free has a choice. General Free may either be executed or he may go to trial. Scott chooses a trial. And so Lightbringer was like, okay, you can do it here, or, wherever you want. You can choose the location. And Scott, again, very, very casual. Just like, yeah, we can just do it here. I got some stuff being delivered this week, and I just, I want to make sure that nobody steals my Amazon packages, basically.
Yep. And I have a show.
Yeah, I've got a show. I've got stuff to do. So let's just do it here, man. And Lightbringer makes the egregious misstep of calling Big Barda a little bitch, to which she just kicks the absolute crap out of him and is like, say it again, and just beats him to a pulp before he leaves. We don't know much about this trial at this point. And they're discussing how many people they think are going to show up. And he's like, I don't know, Orion, obviously, Light Ray, probably some security. Barda suggests they go to the store and at least pick up a veggie tray.
It's very Midwestern.
This very Midwestern. And then we cut over to another one of Scott's escapes. Scott is standing on a barrel outside of like on a rail yard. And actually one of the train cars that he's directly in front of it says Wayne on it. It's presumably Wayne Industries. For never appearing in this film, by the way, Batman shows up a lot in this film.
It's also important that we haven't mentioned yet. Most of the time Scott is in a t-shirt and jeans, the t-shirt is always some other superhero's t-shirt.
Yes.
Like a Flash, a Green Lantern, the kinds that you would go out and buy, just the symbol and a color. All the time. The kind that you can get at Target right now if you went to Target.
I would like to state that it's only appropriate that and incoming bias and get out your pitchforks and torches, audience, that the villain of Gotham City be included in all of this. That would be Batman.
You're going to be so pleased about some things that happen a little bit later on.
Thank you.
Because what this comic teaches you is that Batman kills babies.
I mean, that doesn't even surprise me, but continue on.
Just to keep you all listening, there is a point where we will explain
what that means.
Batman kills babies.
So Scott climbs into this barrel on the train tracks, and the barrel gets hit by a train. Again, we don't see him escape. We just assume he does. There's, the story continues after that, but we don't see him get out of the barrel. He just gets in the barrel and gets hit by a train. So we flash back to the condo. and everybody's in their superhero gear and whatnot, and Bart is there with a veggie tray. It is exactly like the kind of veggie tray you can get at the local Aldi's.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not a metaphor, it is really a veggie tray. Veggie trays are also very important in the story. So everybody kind of crams in for this little trial, and
crams into their condo.
Into
they're not
their
having
condo.
it. Yeah, they're having it in their living room in their condo.
Yeah. and Light Ray at one point complains that the sofa is inadequate. And Bart replies, "Shut the fuck up, Light Ray," which is also a recurring phrase in this series. Because Light Ray is pretty fucking obnoxious. So Orion begins by saying, and I'm going to read some of this verbatim because it is very important. It's important to clarify at this point that though we are gods, even gods are bound by the laws of the source. Do you not agree, General? And Scott replies, "We're all bound by something." And Orion agrees. And so he says, according to the laws, the source dictate that in the trial of a god, the High Father is responsible for appointing the accuser, the defender, and the judge. And given these laws, I appoint myself to the positions of accuser, defender, and judge. This is a dick move. So the trial begins. But before it begins, Scott notifies everyone that he's going to get a carrot.
He just dips it in the ranch.
Just dips it in the ranch and is obnoxiously crunching on this carrot while this begins. Like, he could not give less of a fuck. And Orion notes that, as we're aware, Darkseid has acquired the anti-life equation. We were able to hold off his armies, but the war continues. And I would suggest at this point that the war continues in our own minds, in the minds of our own gods. To which Barter replies, "Jesus, Orion, what is wrong with you?" And Orion is pissed about being interrupted and is like, "Hey, look, I can ask you to leave if you don't want to be here." But she, of course, decides to stay. He then poses to Scott a series of true or false questions, letting him know that if Darkseid is manipulating Scott through the anti-life equation, he will be able to determine that, because the statements that are true to Scott would be, in fact, false. He is not to answer with his beliefs or with his doubts. He can't say, "I don't know." He can't say, "It depends." Scott, is what he believes to be true or false. So it's an interesting little loop. It's an interesting little ride that we're going to go on. To begin, we confess that you believe Darkseid had infected you with the anti-life equation, true or false? And Scott replies, true. You then accuse the High Father of being similarly infected, true or false? And Scott replies, true. The High Father is an agent of Darkseid, true or false? Scott replies, I don't know. And Orion's like, you gotta answer true or false. You cannot say, I don't know. You know what you believe. Is this true or is this false? And Scott reluctantly agrees that yes, he thinks that's true. The High Father is an agent of Darkseid, and Scott replies, maybe true. I guess. The High Father is an agent of Darkseid, and finally he replies, true. Orion then asks Scott if he is an agent of Darkseid, to which he, as in Orion, is Orion an agent of Darkseid? And Scott replies, true. Orion then asks Scott if Scott, is an agent of Darkseid, and Scott replies, false. So then Orion posits to him that an agent of Darkseid would deny that he was an agent of Darkseid, true or false? And Scott is like, well, true. An agent of Darkseid would also accuse the High Father of being an agent of Darkseid, true or false? And Scott replies, true. Orion then says, well, you've said both of these things today. You've made both of these statements today. Is that true or false? And Scott says, true. Orion then asks, an agent of Darkseid would not necessarily know he was an agent of Darkseid, true or false? Scott replies, true. Orion then says, therefore, you could be an agent of Darkseid, true or false? And Scott replies, true. You killed Granny Goodness, true or false? Scott replies, false. And Big Barda killed Granny Goodness when Scott defied my orders, true or false? And Scott said true. You saw Light Ray kill Forager here in this room. True. Forager deserved to die. True or false? And he said, I don't know. Before Scott can answer this question, as Orion is yelling at him to basically, I don't care about what you believe. Is this true or false? The doorbell rings. So Barda gets up, says, 1 second, that's the door. And there's a pause in the panels, basically, while they're waiting for her to come back. She comes back with the delivery of the Amazon package that Scott had been waiting for. And it's like, oh, your package is here. I think it's a microphone.
It's a microphone for your machine.
For your machine. And so Scott asks Orion if this is a trap. And Orion gives him a complete non-answer. Where basically Orion is like, look, I'm the High Father. You have to address me that way. And Scott is like, hey, look, I escape from traps. This is what I do. Orion lets him know that everything's a trap. We are all bound. Remember what you said. We're all bound to something. And Orion addresses him as Scott. And Scott points out that that's not his name. And his name's not Mr. Miracle either. His name basically was given to him by Granny Goodness. His real father didn't give him his name, and he never actually asked if his dad ever gave him a name, but he didn't, at least as far as we know. Orion points out that he must hate his father, or our father, the High Father, and there's a series of questions. You hate me, you hate New Genesis, you hate Apocalypse, you hate your career, you hate your childhood, you hate your life, you hate yourself, you hate God. All of that is true. And Orion asks him if all he feels is hate. And Scott says that it's true. Essentially, hate is what Scott is living off of right now. Hate made him attempt to kill himself. The anti-life equation is hate. And Scott says true. And then Orion asks, you are the anti-life equation, true or false? And Scott can't answer. Scott actually just freaks out. He freaks out, starts screaming, and punches Orion right in the face. He essentially has a panic attack. And Barda comes in to comfort him. Orion has been knocked to the ground. His helmet's been knocked off. And he's like, geez, dude. And
goes and gets a carrot.
Goes and gets a carrot and just munches on this carrot, dips it in some ranch. And then after completing the carrot, tells Scott that he's guilty. He's been judged guilty. And he acknowledges that he can't contain Mr. Miracle, who can escape from anything. So he's got to report to New Genesis in 3 days, and then he will be summarily executed. This is the end of that issue. And the next issue is probably I think it's probably my favorite in the entire series. It's about Scott's last 3 days. Him and Barda travel around. They meet up with Funky Flashman.
Who randomly yells Excelsior, like at the
Yes.
end of things. Like
Yes.
he'll say something dumb and then just be like, Excelsior!
Yeah. So Funky Flashman's kind of answer to this is that, if you're going to fight Darkseid, you need everybody to like you. So we gotta like up your PR and whatnot. But the angle that we're going to take is that, you're on the record saying that you tried to escape death. So we're just going to play this off like another suicide attempt. And we're going to lean into that. And this time nobody will save you. That way you get executed and everybody wins. Funky Flashman is not helpful.
And then I'm going to steal your ideas.
Yeah. There is a brief sex scene that I won't get into. Well, it's not really brief. It's actually
It's not brief.
lengthy.
Let's be kind to Scott.
Yeah. But the important parts that you need to note here is the beginning of the sex scene. And again, this is in 9 panels, so nothing changes during the entire run of this in the layout or anything like that. It's 9 panels of Scott being tied up in bed, completely nude, in a Christ-like figure. He very much looks like your standard image of Jesus on the cross, except he's not on the cross. He's in bed Barda is in some fetish gear. And he does remind her, and this isn't the only reason I'm even bothering to mention this part at all, is that he's the one that's tied up. And so he reminds her that he can always escape. But this really kind of exemplifies the level of trust they have for one another. Of course, he can always get out. Of course he can. But that's not what this is about. You know what I mean? So they have intercourse. Intercourse is had. They visit the grave of Oberon, who of course had passed away, in fact. And they seem to be, as far as I can tell, they seem to be in like LA because the traffic is terrible.
They are in Los Angeles, yeah. They specifically talk about the 101, the 10, yeah.
Okay, you've actually been to LA, so that's helpful. I assumed from the traffic and the general palm trees of the area.
Yeah.
So they're in traffic. They're trying to get to downtown, and so there are a lot of comedic moments in this particular issue. But they're sitting in traffic, and Scott asks Barda if they have a song, and they could, like if we do have a song, I could ask the Mother Box to play it. We could have like a moment. And Barda reminds them that they met in the pits. They don't have a song. There was no music playing. It was all around them was the moans of the damned. And so Scott, smartass that he is, asks the Mother Box to play the moans of the damned. And the Mother Box is like, well, can you please specify which damned?
Which damned?
And so he's like, yeah, the pit about 10 years back. And of course, then in the car, instead of music, it's just like a lot of, no, oh God, why? And they're laughing. Like, this is a funny moment for them. So this is again a comedic beat, but it also kind of exemplifies like when you've had a fucked up childhood, the stuff that's normal or even kind of amusing to you is horrifying to other people sometimes. And that's one of the things, like, how is that normal? Like, how is that a moment that you can sit in the car and listen to the screams of the damned and just giggle about it? Like, that's right. That's what it sounded like when we first met. Haha, so they're at a diner. They're getting some sandwiches, and they're just walking around, spending time. They go to, they go to a little lagoon area, and Scott remarks about how beautiful it is. They go to a fair, and Scott wins Barda a Wonder Woman doll, which is kind of hilarious. It's like one of those chibi dolls with the oversized head. They spend their night on the beach.
Doesn't really win it for her.
Well,
he sucks at the throwing the ball at the cans, and so finally does basically a FaceTime with the dude running the stand's girlfriend to basically like be like, hey, I'm Miracle Man, and this guy loves you.
Yeah.
And then the guy's like, here's a giant doll.
Right. And and they go to the beach outside of the boardwalk, and they're having a very philosophical discussion at this point about God, and kind of how God exists, and the world is a part of God. And this is something actually that I think, JR, you would probably be better at reading and understanding than I. I am not a theologian in any way, shape, or form. But basically the summation is that without God, he wouldn't exist. And if he exists, then God exists. We look to ourselves to see our own face, and we find the face of God. Again, some really, really important arc words there. Meanwhile, they're back sitting in traffic, returning home. And the one thing that's notable about this particular traffic jam is Barda asks him, if you can escape anything, then escape this. And of course, he can't. They
He's
go
like, yeah,
to,
it's LA traffic. There is no escape.
And so they go up to an overlook to they wanted to like look at the stars, but of course there's so much light pollution, and they really don't see anything. they're like, you know what, we should probably go home. They get back to their condo.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. One of my favorite lines in this is that he's like, I wanted to look at the stars and I just wanted things to make sense. You know, I wanted an answer. And she's like, well, you could look down at the valley. And he's like, no one has answers looking at the valley.
I figured that would probably be more meaningful to you, Josh.
Tom King spent a lot of time in Los Angeles. I'm just saying, a lot of this spoke directly to me. He has the hate of someone that actually lived in Los Angeles.
Yeah. I was like, well, Josh will get this. I prefer Northern California myself.
I do too.
So yeah, they go back home. They make love again, and now it's time. Funky Flashman is there, letting Scott know that he's going to have a huge press conference before
he goes to his execution.
And Barda comes in. She's completely nude, by the by. And just starts whooping the hell out of the security that has arrived with Funky Flashman. She also goes upside the head of Flashman as well. But she takes him out, and then takes them down to what appears to be the basement of the condo, the like trash, not compactor. What is the word? I'm totally dysnomic now. What is the name of that thing? Incinerator. Thank you.
Yes.
And incinerates the bodies of the security. And they head over to New Genesis. At this point, I need you to understand that there are two separate things happening during a lot of this. What's happening is that I'm going to tell you about the conversation that they're having as they're going through, and what they're doing is they are going through and they are fighting people, dodging lasers and punching the crap out of people and whatnot, and breaking in and crawling through tubes and whatnot. But they're talking as they're doing this. They're having a perfectly normal conversation about some home renovations that they'd like to do. So you got to kind of picture that they are fighting people as this home renovation conversation is going on. Barda wants to reduce the size of the kitchen. Barda wants to reduce the size of the living room. Barda wants to make a second bathroom. Barda wants to get rid of the closet. Barda is basically, letting they're having this conversation about like all the stuff that's in their house. We don't need this much stuff. We can really just kind of consolidate the space. We'll knock down this one wall. We'll get rid of some of this extra stuff and whatever. Meanwhile, there's like warnings that are going off, like warning, acid gas will now melt you. Warning, a tide dragon will now consume you. Warning, etc. And as they're going through and talking about their renovations, my closet this, and I don't need that. The closet's gone. And then what happens where, what happens with the closet becomes a room apart from the kitchen. We'll make it a bathroom. And
it's John Wick meets HDTV.
Yeah. Yeah. And it'll be a little smaller, but it'll be cozy. And so as they're fighting, they are also, and they're also kind of having this discussion about home renovations. They're also talking about how what happened in their childhood affects them differently, even though they were raised by the same people in the same place. What Granny Goodness did to them, and how it kind of affected them as adults. Scott points out that, he lived in a 3x3 box when he was in Apocalypse, and that he, learned that he liked having space because he didn't like not having space by living in the box. All the bad stuff that happens to you when you're a kid, it's a warning, which isn't the same as being captured by it. And that's also kind of reinforced by the fact that as they're going through this area, they're getting these robotic warning, you are not allowed to be here. Warning, nothing can cross the forever void. So they're having two separate conversations at once while also fighting. So it's a lot. Scott lets Barda know that it haunts him. His childhood haunts him, and he doesn't know why it doesn't haunt her. And Granny had told Scott that she loved him. And Barda's like, well, you believed her? And Scott replies, my father, who is God, had just given me away to the devil. What do I know? What did I know about believing? And she replies that, you thought it was all love because your father, who is God, showed you to expect love. But for her, she was always in the pit. There was no God or father. She didn't expect anything. And Granny's words were just more noises among the screams. You don't believe noise.
I have a question.
Yes.
An emergency break question, I suppose. He says that his father is God.
Yeah.
Right.
Are we going to go back to the you are not supposed to know the face of God experience at this point, or is that not related? Although I feel nothing is not related in this.
Right. It's
web.
Everything, every little bit is somehow adding or will become relevant later. And the God talk is a lot, because a lot of people refer to as God. There's God, like the concept of God that is discussed. There is the old gods, which are the people that died, and then the new gods were formed along with whole planets. Darkseid is God. The High Father is a god. And then there's the new gods, which is everybody that's underneath them. So I believe it is to be vague on purpose until it is not. Until it is very specifically called out in the comic.
Okay, there's now this my father who is God, and then all right.
Right. Yes.
And then the voice of the literal angelic voice of God. So
I'm glad that we have the theologian here to help us puzzle this out.
I don't know how much of how much a good job I'll be doing on that. But
he's a theologian for a religion that has one or three gods, depending on how you.
Do you want me to do like a lot of Trinitarian theology for you right now? I feel like that would take us some time and be a little bit off subject. But I mean, I'm more than willing to, like, as Athanasius says, about the whole entire experience.
This is now a 4-part episode.
We let him do things, and now we regret it.
Coming soon to Graphically Novel, the new show. God damn it! Just a whole series of. We brought our friend the theologian in to talk about this comic book that involves the gods. Let's have a conversation. But that would allow us to talk about Wicked and the Divine. All right, so let's continue.
Moving on. So after this conversation that I just recounted, it's kind of quiet for several panels as they're kind of crossing this tightrope together. Barda is using. She's basically she's holding on and going hand over hand, and Scott is above her, like walking a tightrope. And it's pretty quiet. They're passing through, and so Scott just picks the conversation back up and says, "So, half a living room." And Barda's like, "Yeah, it'll work." And Scott asks, "Well, okay, well, what's the other half?" And Barda mentions that she wants a bedroom there. They go on this tangent for a while, like, okay, well, why, what bedroom? Wait, which bedroom is ours? What's the other bedroom for? Like, we have a blow-up mattress for guests. Like, why do we need another bedroom?
It's the most dude reaction ever, too. It's like,
yeah,
blow-up mattress in the lab.
Right. And then Scott finally catches on a little bit and is like, wait, who's going to be in the new bedroom? And this conversation pauses briefly for them to fight Lightbringer, and she knocks him out. And just after she knocks Lightbringer out, she's like, Scott, so I'm pregnant. And Scott is actually thrilled by this news. But it's just so abrupt in the middle of the fight scene. And they finally arrive at the High Father throne, at Orion's throne. And Barda's like, you just got to talk to him. He's your brother. if he's, and Scott's like, well, he's not really my brother and he doesn't talk. But she encourages him to make an attempt. And if he doesn't, if he doesn't comply, if he doesn't want to talk to them, then just, cut his fucking dick off.
Yup.
And there's a brief pause, and Scott is like, hey, you know what? I'll clear out those boxes in the empty room when I get back. And she's like, okay, that sounds good.
He's expecting to come back from these, like
He can escape anything.
all right. I reached the point where I'm like, pride goeth before a fall there, good old Scott. But I mean, I could be wrong.
They go into the throne room, and while they are there, Scott gets his first glimpse of Darkseid, and Darkseid says, Darkseid does not do, Darkseid is.
Because Orion's dead. Darkseid has entered and killed Orion, and Scott says, what did you do?
Yeah. So Orion is dead. Darkseid has killed him. Darkseid, I need to also point out again, is barely visible in this panel. Like, you can mainly see the glowing red of his eyes, and it's kind of glitchy. There's a lot of glitch work in these panels. And Barda enters a second later, and Scott asked Scott what happened, and he said, I saw it. I saw the face of God. I wasn't looking, but there it was. I saw the face of God. You must not look into the face of God, Scott free. So at this point, so this is issue number, I think 7.
I have another question.
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna go Hebrew Bible here for a second. The Hebrew ultimate name of God, which cannot be pronounced.
Yes.
Roughly translates, which cannot be translated, but roughly translates. Oh, good. To I am what I am. Right?
Yes. Correct.
Right. I am what I am. Like, Darkseid doesn't do, Darkseid is. Very similar.
Right.
Yes. That is
confirmed.
The whole point.
Darkseid is Popeye.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Scott's the anti-life equation.
Okay, that's that right. I'm gonna. So thank you very much for.
This has been Red Conversations. Yeah.
Okay. So a fun bit of trivia. We are now, as Josh said, about halfway through of the book. When I was reading this originally, I was reading it in single issues. I did not read it in a trade. And there was a massive delay between that episode that issue that we just finished and this issue. The clever explanation for this and how that plays out is absolutely brilliant, because there was a delay of roughly 8 months between the issues. So when we open up on this issue, Scott is driving Barda to the hospital and she is in labor. She's ready to have the baby. They get her into the hospital. This is the first, what they call the new Genesis. This is the first new Genesis to be born on Earth.
Another question. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Apologies all around. Rolling back a bit. So Darkseid kills Orion. We have that whole philosophical thing that I just talked about, and Scott just leaves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In fact, we're about to find out is the new leader, the new High Father.
Yes. Yeah. He is now the new High Father of New Genesis.
All right. So, all right. Good times. Things have happened. All right.
Yes.
Continue
Things
on.
have happened.
Things have
happened off panel.
Okay. Cool. See also frame 14
because of the delay. So,
refer to Amazing Spider-Man number 3.
So, the baby is being born. They still can't figure out a name for it. They're also not quite sure what to do, because Barda is, yes, she's a woman, but also she is not entirely human. So, like, they're not quite sure like how to handle this exactly. But the hospital staff are being as low key about it as they can.
Too low
They're still
key.
trying, yeah, a little too low key. They're still trying to work on a name for this kid. We do find out that it's born, that it's a boy, but they still haven't quite figured it out. They go through a litany of kind of ridiculous names that would have really sounded a lot better as like D&D characters or LARP characters, like Axe Blow and Thunder Rake and
Ice
shit
Dragon.
like that. What's that?
Ice Dragon.
Ice Dragon, yeah.
I always have to bring up Ice Dragon, the worst LARP name I ever heard.
In the waiting area of the hospital, kind of hilariously, are a couple of the Furies. And the Furies are not what you immediately think of when you think of like the classical mythos of the Furies, but the Furies are a part of, like Big Barda is a Fury. This is
Yes.
basically her
Sisters, for lack of a better
sisters,
term.
lack of a better term. They're all weird looking. One of them looks like she's in like weird bondage gear. The other one is like looks like a weird motorcyclist from hell. There's somebody else with just like matted, gross hair, like green hair. They're all kind of ugly. Not super important to the story, but they do give Scott something very, very important. It's called the Farron knife, and the Farron knife kills gods because Barda is not human. Her skin cannot be cut by like mortal instruments, basically. And it will essentially, they give it to him essentially to aid the birth if necessary. The Farron knife is forged from Darkseid's own flesh. Just to give you a idea of how powerful it is. And the Furies let him know that one day they'll use it to kill him, but for now he can borrow it, to assist with the birth, basically. Everyone in this book, by the by, is very cavalier about like, I'll kill you later, but first let's get some lunch. Is kind of the attitude a lot of the time. So this will come up a lot as we go through. So Barda gives birth, or Barda is in the process of giving birth, when she reminds Scott about a instrument called Jacob's Ladder, which is the only way out of the pit, the X pit of Apocalypse. And so she tells him that the baby book basically said while you're giving birth you're supposed to think of something calm. And she always thinks of Jacob's Ladder because that is how Scott escaped Apocalypse, was by using Jacob's Ladder to climb out of Apocalypse. And she tells him about how she always used to watch him, attempting to escape out of Granny's reach and trying to leave Apocalypse, and he tried to escape on the ladder and all the Furies were chasing him, and he would look back down at them and wave and smile and bow and say, I can always escape. And they'd pull him back down into Apocalypse. That is eventually how he managed to get out, was through Jacob's Ladder. There is a birth scene that I don't feel the need to describe. If you've had junior high sex ed, you've probably already seen this video. At least in the state of Illinois. And so the baby is born, but the baby has the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck. It is choking to death. And the doctors try to cut it, but of course they can't because Barda isn't mortal, etc. So he uses the Farron knife to cut the umbilical cord, and the baby is born and fine. He returns the knife to the Furies, and they decide to name their child the grandson of Darkseid, the son of the High Father, the first child born of Apocalypse and New Genesis, Jacob, after Jacob's Ladder. So Scott and Barda now have a child. They decide to essentially, so the back half of this book kind of deals with like their parenting while also being generals in this global war, etc. And every other day one of them goes to the battlefield and the other one stays home to take care of Jacob. Funky Flashman is also their nanny, which is pretty hilarious. Um, so, so there's some fighting. And just like before, during the scene where they are, talking about house renovations and while also like, dodging lasers and kicking ass, there's some scenes of them, talking via essentially the mother box about like, oh, the baby's down for his nap, he's, we got to figure out a better way to get him to sleep, as there's like fighting and stuff going on. And so this is also interesting too, because now it kind of, one of the themes that emerges is like, if you experience a lot of childhood trauma and then you have a child yourself, the kind of fears that you have about, will I fuck my kid up the way I was fucked up? Will I, what can I do to prevent my kid from turning out like me or having a childhood like mine? And this is going to recur a lot too. Funky Flashman has given Jacob a small stuffed Batman toy, and the small stuffed Batman toy is in the crib. And Scott yells at him for putting this toy in the crib. You can't put things in the crib when they're this little. They have studies about infant death syndrome, and it can kill them if they've got toys and stuff in the crib, pillows, whatever. And Funky Flashman insists that everyone had a Batman, and Batman doesn't kill babies. And Scott replies,
yells,
yes, indeed, Batman kills babies. They have studies.
I appreciate that. Continue.
For
those of you just joining this podcast,
first of all, why did you start an hour and some in?
So, yeah, but for those of you just joining, I have a deep and abiding resentment towards Batman for various and sundry reasons. Some of his comics are good, I'll admit this, but I have this like deep, why are you, daddy issues man, doing all of this with your billions of dollars and not, I don't know, affecting actual change and going to therapy? So there you have it. Continuing back to the story.
So, kind of the condensed version of a lot of this is basically, like I said, like they're parenting this child while they're also fighting this war. And, Bart is talking about, Jacob's first laugh and, and also what are we going to do about this battle? And, meanwhile, there's a lot of scenes where Jacob is, holding the little stuffed Batman, like, shoving it into his mouth and stuff like that, and meeting with other parents in the park and talking about how, it's so tough to leave the kid, even though they've got a nanny, like they, him and his wife were raised in these kind of lonely household. Like he doesn't detail exactly what happened to this poor woman in the park that's just treating him like a normal guy. But we kind of were raised alone, and it's real tough to leave him as a result. Like we don't want to leave, and doctor's appointments for the kid and stuff like that. And so they go through, and there's a lot of there's battling, there's child rearing moments, while they're talking about this war, and Funky Flashman's trying to give the kid baby food and whatnot. Jacob takes his first steps, so it's kind of like it flashes back and forth between the war moments and the child rearing moments and the first steps, the first words, the whatever. And there's a point at one point where Scott kind of falls on the battlefield, and he's not dead, but he just kind of collapses and very clearly wants to give up. Like is just kind of on his hands and knees, head down. And the only thing that really brings him back to his feet again is a call, basically from Barda, about how every time Jacob sees a picture of him, he says "Dada," and then Scott gets up and starts moving again. Like the only thing at this point that is really motivating him is the fact that he has a wife, he has a child, and giving up maybe isn't an option anymore. Maybe he wants to live, because that's his life now. That's his reason to go on, is this kid. So we get into, at this point, that concludes that issue, and the next issue sees them at the heart of apocalypse, and they are kind of going through the heart of apocalypse, and there's a lot of exposition at this point about masters, apprentices, art. He is talking to somebody who looks kind of like very Elizabethan in dress. I don't think he's ever addressed by name, but who's like, oh, come with me. I'm going to take you in here.
Yeah, he's a random apocalypse guy, isn't he?
Just random apocalypse guy.
Yorick. I said Yorick.
Yorick.
That's a different series entirely. But he tells them a story about that he had a thing with Leonardo da Vinci back in the day, and they used to do it, and so Da Vinci tells him this story about an apprentice who thinks he's better than his master, challenges his master to a contest. It takes a whole year for them to finish the paintings, and when they unveil them, the apprentice has a picture, after a year of work, has only painted a picture of about maybe 6 or less grapes on a plate. And the audience is like, what the fuck is this? And the apprentice looks up at the sky, just cool and collected, calm as a cucumber, and looks at some birds who fly out of the sky towards the picture and start pecking at the picture, trying to eat the grapes because they look so realistic and so perfect, that to the birds, it's not art, it's just what is. And what is better than what is. And the apprentice is bowing and smiling, pointing at the birds. He knows that he won, and he says, that not there's a need, but let's see what's behind the master's curtain. And the master says, what curtain? So that's also an important thing to hold in your mind here as we go forward. So on day 2, they're going through war negotiations, basically, and they're not super important. It's just basically it's the bureaucracy of war, basically. Right. It's if we had this many days and these many troops and blah blah blah. Day 3 is a brief interlude between Scott and Barda. And Barda is drinking something called bone wine, that they were given as children in Apocalypse. It is essentially fermented bone marrow of captured gods that has been brewed into a beverage, and they were delivered. This beverage was a certain amount had to be delivered to Darkseid on the reg. And apparently it's delicious, according to them. This is an important thing that seems like it's an aside, but it actually does play into the larger plot. So do remember that this bone wine thing is a thing. Day 4, we are back to more bureaucracy of war. It's not really super important to the overarching plot. It's just kind of illustrating that, like, war isn't just battles. It's a lot of red tape, numbers, whatever. And there's going to be, a commission that's, going to find some data and whatnot. And we cut over again to Scott, who is having a panic attack, for lack of a better term. He is shivering, his teeth are chattering, and Barda is there, but Barda is pretty chill. She's essentially dicking around in a notebook and is like, hey, you're fine. Oh gosh, do you smell that? Oh my God, I can't believe they're burning the dead again at this time of night. Like, very casual. On day 5, Scott is given what's called the Mirror of Goodness. It is something that Granny Goodness, it's an artifact that Granny Goodness used to have. Apparently, when they were children, Granny Goodness would also give them corrective surgeries and skin grafts and laser removals, etc., to make them look a certain way. And she would make them look into this mirror and tell them, on the outside, you're beautiful, and on the inside, you're mine. So again, talk about some really fucked up abuse. And Scott undresses in front of the mirror and looks at himself in the mirror, and he and Barda, who eventually, joins him, they look horrible. They look like rotting corpses. They are not pretty to look at. And it's implied that this mirror basically shows you the opposite of how you are. Day 6, we are meeting up with Lightbringer and a couple other members of the council, various Furies and random apocalypse people. And the guy who told him the story about Da Vinci tells him that he had made it up, that it was a complete lie. He tried to get with Da Vinci, but Da Vinci wasn't having him because he had a boyfriend. And Scott's like, "Why did you lie to me?" And he's like, "I don't know. You take a piss with the Son of God. You got to say something, even if it ain't true." So day 7 is even more diplomacy and war bureaucracy. But on this day, Scott is told that they have come to a proposal. Darkseid is willing to withdraw all of his troops, all of his military forces and whatever, and then allow the New Genesis folks to go to Apocalypse to inspect it. And finally, and most importantly, Darkseid will surrender the anti-life equation. And Scott's like, "That wasn't even on the table. Where did this come from?" And he is informed by the messenger of Darkseid that Darkseid only asked for one thing in return for all of this, to end the war entirely. In order for Darkseid to accept this, he wants custody of his only grandchild, Jacob Free, to be raised on Apocalypse as the one true heir to Darkseid. This does not go over well at all. It is
as you would imagine.
Yeah. There's no dialogue really on the panels from Scott or Barda, but Barda is immediately enraged. Scott is stunned. So that's where that episode, that's where that's that's where that issue ends. And so they go back home, and Scott goes out with a couple members of what looks to be the Justice League. I know Booster Gold is one of them.
Booster Gold is one of them. I don't recognize the other one, but I only recognize Booster Gold because I fucking love Booster.
He's pretty all right.
He's a dude that came from the future to the past so he could be a superhero. That is his power.
So he goes out and it gets drunk with a couple of these dudes, and he's having a tough time. He wants to stop the war, but he doesn't want to give up his son to do that, especially not to Darkseid, especially not to Apocalypse. He knows all too well what happens in Apocalypse, and he knows all too well what it's like to be raised as the son of Darkseid. So if he chooses this option, this is kind of a trolley problem here. Sacrifice your only son in order to save millions.
So very like New Testament biblical.
Yes. Yeah. I thought you would pick that up when what I was putting down there.
Well, it's also interesting that, and I know a little bit about DC, that Apocalypse, the word in Koine Greek, means revelation, sudden revelation, pulling back the curtain. Take that for what it's worth.
God, I am so glad to have you here.
Most people think of Apocalypse as being like end times, but that's not it. Apocalypse just means to reveal, and it's used often in that context. So I think it fits. here.
Oh my God. That's actually important in the context of the story. So I'm glad. So this scene is not particularly notable because he just comes home drunk and, crawls into bed with Barda, but it is important to note that they're preparing for Jake's first birthday. And Barda's like, hey, we need to get a cake for Jake's birthday. He likes Batman, maybe a Batman cake. And Scott drunkenly replies, Batman? No way. Remember, Batman kills babies.
The one thing this comic taught me: Batman kills babies.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
But what happens next is important when he's in the shower.
Yes. So Barda is, while he's showering, Barda is talking to him about, planning Jacob's birthday party. Like, maybe we'll just invite a couple of Justice League people. Funky should probably be there. We have to invite the Furies, even though, it's like basically like her side of the family that doesn't get along with them, But she says, you're supposed to make it a celebration. I read that you're supposed to make it a celebration, for us, not for him. Because for us, it's been a whole year and he's alive and we're alive. We've made it. And that's kind of what a first birthday means. But as she is saying this, that again, with the 9 panels, Scott slowly just kind of drops to the ground and curls up in a ball in the fetal position. He is completely in the fetal position by the time she says we've made it, indicating that Scott is not, in fact, okay. Scott goes to order the cake, and he's like, oh, we've got this, trying to figure out what day to order the cake on. Because
the birthday's on Sunday, but they have a thing on Saturday.
Yeah, and the thing being the exchange with Darkseid. But Barda wants to have his birthday party on his birthday, but that's Sunday, and the exchange with Darkseid is supposed to take place on Friday. So, boy, I don't really know
Saturday.
what time or Saturday. So finally, the bored-looking woman at the Jewel or wherever it is like, okay, Friday at noon sounds great. And he orders Jacob a Batman cake.
Even though Batman kills babies.
So it's evening time now, and Scott is just kind of sitting or laying on the couch, and Barda comes in after having put Jacob to bed, and is kind of talking about naps and sleep schedule, blah blah blah. But Scott wants to talk about the war. And he's like, we have to at least discuss it. Barda does not want to hear this at all, and just hauls off and shatters. There's a picture above the couch. The picture is of the cover of the first issue of Mr. Miracle. Like it is not just a picture, it is literally the cover of Mr. Miracle. And Barda punches the wall so hard it shatters the glass of the picture, waking up Jacob and leaving Scott on the couch by himself. Barda does not want to talk about this at all. And so Scott is sitting in traffic again, and is requesting a review of something called the Ablazed Oracle. And I will read this part verbatim, because he's trying to get basically information from them, but they haven't completed the request yet, essentially. And it's because the interpretation of the Ablazed Oracle takes some time. It is basically trying to read the face of God. And so the Oracle tells him that it appears that all will be lost and all will suffer. Scott then goes into a party city.
Yep.
And in one of the more, this is just such a fucking mood, these 2 pages, where he's buying like birthday party supplies, like Batman themed birthday party supplies for Jacob's birthday. And the guy's trying to get him to get a rewards card. And Scott's like, there's this war, I'm losing, billions are going to die. Like, I can totally stop it, but I got to surrender my only son. Like, what should I do? And
to the clerk. Who's like, that's rough, man.
Who's ringing him up? Yeah, exactly. He's like, oh, buddy, that sucks. but maybe, maybe the whole point of it all is to maximize the happiness for the most people.
You get philosophy 101, like from this random clerk.
Like, maybe the whole point of it all is to maximize the happiness for the most people, just a deep, meaningful bliss. It's almost math or an equation. That
a life equation.
Life should be a life equation or something. So if it increases happiness for most people to end the war, then go for it. If the happiness you lose for the kid is less than all those people not dying, then, just do what you got to do. It sucks. I guess that's life, man. But do you have a rewards membership? And it's just such a mood, because he's just like, yeah, random clerk, what should I do? And he's like, oh man, that's tough, but like, that's the trolley problem for you.
Yep. And at the end, you probably should really get a rewards membership. It's practically free money.
Yeah. So Scott and Barda are talking at the playground. Jacob's in a swing, and they're talking about their childhood again. And it's like, hey, Scott's like, well, you were raised on Apocalypse, and I was raised there. We're happy now, aren't we? We're doing good. And Barda points out that they were prisoners. They were tortured. They weren't happy. They didn't have a good childhood. And Scott's like, yeah, but it came out okay. Like, it turned out fine. We're doing well, aren't we? And this pisses Barda off. And this is a brutal conversation. Just absolutely fucking brutal. Because Barda's response is, if we're doing so well, then why did I have to find you bleeding out next to the toilet? And Scott replies that, that's not fair, that he's trying. He was in a bad place. He just had to escape. And Barda is like, yeah, well, what did I have to do? I had to pick you up off the floor. I had to, cry with the strangers in the emergency room. I had to make shit work. And while you were, too self-absorbed to do anything. Like, when do I get to escape, Scott? When do I get to escape this shit? What were you escaping from? Was it me? Were you willing to die to get away from me? I shouldn't be with you because of that. And instead, all I do is take care of you. You're a selfish bastard. Have you ever thought of anybody else but yourself in this entire time? Scott is kind of bewildered by this, and he's like, I'm not trying to hurt anything, but you're willing, and she lets him have it. You're willing to give our kid over to Darkseid and to be raised in Apocalypse so you can win some fucking war. You want to do the exact same thing to this kid that we had to deal with when we were kids. And Scott's like, well, we got through it, and she's like, no, we didn't. We are the products of this place. Yeah. We are it. And he isn't. Jacob isn't. And I don't want him to be part of that. So it's rough. Like, it's really fucking rough. Meanwhile, we cut over to Scott and Funky Flashman decorating for the party. And this is not super important, but it is notable that Funky Flashman tells Scott about how he's got this really good story about a star-eating god and a dog that helps him find stars, a golden retriever. Me and Jacob came up with it together. Genius Jake doesn't have to talk. I talk plenty. He provides all the imagination. I do the words. This is a summation of the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby relationship right there.
Yep.
It is incredibly on the nose. So Funky Flashman yells Excelsior, and
and that's about it.
Spat on that. Yeah. So Barda and Scott are hanging out on the couch together, and Scott tells her that he's thought about it, and Darkseid is going to win. He's got too many troops. Even if they fight him, it'll take time, but eventually they'll all die. So he is going to bring Jacob to him. But when the time comes, instead of giving him the kid, he's just going to kill his father. Granny said that there's the prophecy. Maybe he can fulfill it. Maybe he is the son of Darkseid. And then after that's done, they can have the birthday party. and Barda's like, sounds good. I'll come too. And they decide to go ahead and make love again. This issue actually does close on, again, one of the panels of the all black panels that say Darkseid is. And this is how the next
can you
episode
kill
begins.
something that is?
That's a great question, and we will find out, or maybe we won't.
Maybe yes, maybe we don't know. Who are we? What's going on? Darkseid is. Darkseid is.
So we open up on another veggie tray, and they're preparing to go to the meeting with Darkseid on Apocalypse, and getting ready for the party as well. So the baby's in a stroller. Of course, they bring the little toy stuffed Batman with, even though Batman kills babies, and they head over to Apocalypse. There is a wonderful series of panels, again, in the 9-panel format, of Darkseid munching on carrots in the veggie tray. So, like, for Christmas last year, I got Adam a notebook with these 9 panels on it because it is the funniest series of panels in this entire series. It is just Darkseid munching on some carrots. It's great. So they approach Darkseid on his throne, and they are, so Darkseid has a hench guy there, essentially, named Desaad. And Desaad immediately says, you've come to kill our Lord God. And he's like, no. And Scott's like, no, man. We're just here to end the war, accept his offer, trade our kid for peace, whatever. And Desaad is like, oh, you're lying. But Scott Free is very sarcastic, and is like, yeah, how am I going to do that? I'm going to kill an infinite god with my incredible escape powers. I'm going to escape him to death. And Desaad is like, well, that was sarcastic. So they prepare to give Jacob up, and Barda is, says her words of farewell, that this is Grandpa, and remember that Mommy loves you, and hands him over to Darkseid. There is a series of hilarious panels where Jacob is being held by Darkseid's 2 giant hands, and his immediate reaction is to reach up and grab Darkseid's nose and yell baby gibberish. So Darkseid lets him know that, okay, we will honor our side of the pact. That we'll withdraw our troops. We'll return all your captives, and your inspectors will be welcomed. And as for the anti-life equation, the equation is knowledge. It is learning the way to take a person's will to remove that which allows any resistance. It is an understanding of how to excise hope. Now, this knowledge cannot be erased, but here Darkseid removes his own eye and hands it to them and says, without his eye, he can't wield the Omega beams. Without the beams, the equation is useless. He cannot execute the schematic, so he cannot use the anti-life equation without these Omega beams, I guess, that have something to do with his eye. So the way that it works is they have the gun, and Darkseid has the ammunition, if that makes any sense. So Barda then squishes his eye and destroys it. Scott asks to say goodbye to his boy, and they allow it. So he talks to Jacob, and he says, when I was in places I thought I couldn't get out of, I thought maybe sometimes, I felt that somewhere someone loved me, or maybe loves me. But I love you, Jacob. I love you so much. And as he does this, he's like, all right, Barda, I got him. Let's go. And Barda whips out this machine, for lack of a better term, which shoots out glowing green energy. It's taken from the miracle machine. They had extracted it a while back and hadn't figured out how to use it until now. It was too much, too powerful, and nothing stops it, nothing slows it, nothing survives it. In other words, there's no escape. And they shoot it directly at Darkseid. And she is screaming, die, die, die. Except it doesn't kill Darkseid, because Darkseid is. Because of the violation of the agreement.
You answered my question. How fun is that? Good times for me. That was, I predicted that, and I feel good about myself. So I am here.
So they tell him that they're going to redeploy the troops, execute all the prisoners, and Darkseid does regret the loss of his eye, but he will take yours instead. And
not quite sure that's how that works, but okay.
Yeah. That's not how eyeballs work.
I mean, little eye for an eye imagery there, which sure.
Yeah. I'll allow it. And Scott literally tells Darkseid, "Fuck you," and they begin to fight. Darkseid, as they are fighting, lets him know that he thinks that Scott is a disappointment. He was given the greatest gift anybody can receive, which was pain. Pain makes you steady, pain makes you strong, pain makes you able to conquer and rule. But what did Scott do with all this pain? He performed some stupid stunts. He got married. He had a kid. What a waste of time. As this is going on, Scott has been knocked to the ground. Jacob has been knocked loose out of his arms, and he is slowly trying to, and Jacob is now crying, slowly trying to crawl over to him to protect him. And Barda, who has been also knocked to the ground as well, is beaten and bleeding. Barda says, "Scott, free, stand." And initially Scott tries to tell her that he can't, he can't do it. But he finally replies, "Standing," and then attacks Darkseid. And he's got a Farron knife. The Farron knife in this particular case was made from Orion. And he says, "Remember Orion, Dad, your other boy who you killed, leaving me the body? Remember Orion, the guy that the prophecy says is the only one who can kill you." It turns out that Barda had managed to make a Farron knife out of the flesh of Orion, because she had the knowledge to make that bone wine that we mentioned earlier, as gifts for Darkseid. She's also able to make these Farron knives. So they get Jacob. Jacob is fine, and immediately Barda's first thing out of her mouth is, "What was up with all the fuck you in front of Jake? You had to swear in front of Jake. Now it's going to be his first words, blah, 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 blah." And then Metron appears again. He is sitting on the throne and pulls back essentially a cloak to reveal himself, and is like, you've prevailed. You've slain the devil. You've embraced your fear. You've embraced your love. You challenged the unchallenged. You dared the trap of death. You escaped. But now it is time to look into the face of God, to hear your cheers and take your final bow. Where you are is not where you should be, scot-free. There is another world. And this is the only panel. This is actually the only series of panels. It's not a 9-panel. It's a 2-page spread of pretty much everybody in the Justice League, sort of erupting out, to go on some kind of quest or fight or whatever. But it is a little glitched out in places as well. And the glitching part makes it very unclear as to what's going on. The final page is just everybody being stunned. The notable part here is that little 1-year-old Jacob manages to say, "Fuck." So, that's why I like to teach babies swears. They're very good at learning them. So we open up again, and everything is normal. Everything is fine. Scott is in the shower. Barda is in bed. The mirror that Granny Goodness, the mirror of goodness, is now hanging in the bathroom. It's their bathroom mirror. They kind of bicker a little bit about the placement of the mirror. Scott shaves. So during this entire time, he's had like a mustache and a beard, but he shaves clean. And things are very weird. Things are very strange. A glitched out version of Granny Goodness is behind him in the mirror, but she's also there next to him in real life, talking about how grown up and handsome he is. How could you have done this to me? All of this pretend life is in your head. You're insane and you're making it up to escape from me. You should have opened your eyes. Metron was a signal. You should have come back. You should have listened to me. We cut over to the kitchen, where Funky Flashman apparently is a little bit late as a nanny, but he arrives just in time for them to go off to Apocalypse and to do basically a solo. But Barda has like a solo combat with somebody named Kanto, and it's a very casual fight. Like, okay, let's just go. And Forager of the Bugs appears next to Scott, and again he's very glitched out. Everything around him is not. Only Forager is. And Forager says, "What can I say, man? You're in hell. You killed yourself. You died. You went to hell. You had your escape, and you actually found a way to escape, and you decided not to escape. So now you're just in hell, like forever. You should have gotten out. It's miserable here. It's all death and fire. Look at what happened to me. I'm telling you, there isn't a speck of hope in it. I know you think you can fight, but you can't punch your way out of this. After this one, there's another one, and after this devil, there's another one, and after this devil, there's another one. Hell doesn't get better. It's never okay, and that's why it's hell." So at this point, it's unclear whether or not any of this has actually even happened. Is he in hell? Is this real? Is this another reality? Is this another world? Is this what is happening? We cut over to Barda getting an ultrasound. She is pregnant again for the second time. It is a girl this time around. And there's in the elevator there, Orion is talking to Scott in the elevator. Nobody else can see him, just Scott. But he tells Scott, Darkseid's gone. I'm God. You're the High Father now. You've got everything you wanted, family of your dreams. You killed yourself. You went to paradise. You're in heaven. You found a way to make this work. You decided to stay. I can't say that I blame you, but I can say I'm a little disappointed in you. Everything here is just easy and nice. You might as well be dead. So this is kind of fucked up, right? Like this is definitely taken a very odd turn. And so Scott and Barda are talking about how they're once again in LA traffic. And they're talking about like this time we can't renovate our way out of this. We have to move. We don't have to be stuck here all the time. LA is a mess. And Barda's like, "Oh, but I love the condo. I love LA." And he's like, "That's a myth. Nobody loves LA."
Right. It's true.
People just come here because they think they have to, and they don't leave because they think that they can't.
Yep. Today I learned I am Mr. Miracle. I escaped.
You can escape anything scot-free.
That's right.
And meanwhile, Funky Flashman and Jacob are playing, and Funky Flashman and Jacob, with great power comes great possibility. And
Excelsior.
Jacob replies, yeah, Excelsior. So they've got Jake, and Jake and Scott go over to the couch, and on the couch is a glitched out representation of Darkseid, who doesn't say anything. And Scott lays on his back. He's got Jacob on his chest. He's singing, the Hush Little Baby to him, and props his feet up on the imaginary ? Real ? Version of Darkseid. Continues singing to Jacob, completely calm. And there's another little flash over to young Scott Free. where it's kind of to echo the story all the way at the beginning of the book. The son asked, "What is the fourth world?" And the father said, "The first world is the old world, the world of my parents, from which they fled. The second world is the new world, which they sought, which they found, where I came to be. The third world is our world as it is now, in the making, the future being born. And the fourth world, my child, is my world, the world I see when I close my eyes and try to escape." So Scott is running to the grocery store, the convenience store, to pick up more hot dogs for Jacob. And yet again, there is a glitched out memory or representation of the High Father, who says, you've had your revelation, you understand now, who you are, who I am. You faced the anti-life equation and it warped you. It warped your world. You almost escaped it, but not quite. You were not as strong as I was. You could not make the choice I had to make, but you know what? Don't be ashamed about that. You tried your best. I'm super proud of you. Scott then punches this ghost memory thing, glitched out thing.
He yells, "Fuck you."
And yells, "Fuck you." And the High Father is like, "Scott, don't you understand who I am and what I did for you?" So there in the rain and walks away. So we cut over again to a normal family life scene, cutting up hot dogs for Jacob. He's got a Batman pacifier, which is pretty cute, even though Batman kills babies. And Scott is now having a conversation with the glitched out representation of Oberon, his former partner and friend. Oberon is like, "Hey, I what do I need more of life for? I had a good life. I saved the world. I made people clap. I saw you married your best girl. I'm doing great. But Scott, how are you?" And Scott replies, "I'm sorry. I think I did everything wrong. I should have escaped. I shouldn't have escaped. Everything is wrong." And Oberon is like, "Hey, look, it's okay. You're all right, kid. Like, that other world that Metron showed you, all these crises and continuities that never really make sense, that world full of superheroes who always end up hunky-dory, you think that's more real than that wife of yours and that kid? Sell me another one." And all of this, he says, "Kid, all of this will break your heart. You can't escape that. But if you're good and if you stay good, you'll know that there's someone out there who will help you put it back together." And we cut over again to Scott and Barda on the couch. And he tells her that something weird happened when he picked up Jacob today. He picked him up and he looked him in the face, and it was like Jake wasn't looking just at him. He was looking past him at his dad and his dad's dad and his dad, all the way back to the beginning. And then he's like, and he says, "I'm not just looking at Jake either. I'm seeing his kid looking at him, and that kid's kid looking, and that, and all that kid, all the way forward to the end." And it just felt like we were nothing. And I was scared, and I almost wanted to run away. I thought it was a trap. But then I thought, all those other people, they're not real anymore, or yet. They went, or they're coming, but they're not here now. And I'm here, and you're here, and Jake's here. Even this new little girl, she's here. And then I wasn't scared. I didn't have to run. I just enjoyed it, seeing all of it, all of us going back and forward, like looking into the face of God. And then Barda asked if he wants to watch something on TV. And he's like, "Oh, I forgot. I accidentally washed the remote in the dishwasher."
Well, no, Jake put it in
the
there.
remote in the dishwasher, and I forgot. Yeah. And Barda says, and she's like, "Yeah, I meant to run to the store today, but everything was super busy." And Barda's like, "Dark side is." And Scott replies, "I know, but we are too." And she says, "Scott free, Mr. Miracle, what is wrong with you?" And he replies, "I can always escape." And she says, "Can you?" And they kiss. And that is the final panel, is a glitched out panel of them kissing. So that is the entirety of the run on Mr. Miracle.
That's how they leave you? That
is how they leave you.
That is how
Did
they
this
leave
even
you.
happen? Did this even happen?
Right.
Was all of that real?
And actually,
Did
there's
you look into the face of
even
God, Scott Free?
yeah, there's even a little panel that says Mr. Miracle will not return.
Yeah.
So, fuck you.
I it's in a cart right now. Mr. Miracle is in a cart right now. It's in a cart with Up in the Sky. So
Yes.
because that was recommended to me by Leia, and
Yes.
I have more affection for DC than she does, but if she recommends something from DC, then I know it is pure gold.
Yes, and I love both of those runs for very good reasons. But what did you think of this one?
This is nonsense, is what this is. This is especially after all of that, after all of that like stuff, and it all comes together.
And then you're left wondering, what was this, or what was the reality? Is he stuck in a different reality? Is he? Yeah.
Is he in limbo? Is he in hell? Is he in heaven? Did he die? Is he alive?
Yeah. Is he in Earth One? I mean, like, is
right.
Where? Yeah. There's so much nonsense going on in that. I mean, it's great. It's absolutely great. But it's a lot.
This story is actually one of the times where I feel like, even though my job is to explain it to you, this doesn't have a satisfying explanation.
Right.
It is highly subjective. And I can only take you so far, but ultimately what you think happened is what happened, which is also a pretty neat trick.
Right. We probably could have explained it by just saying,
that's the whole core.
Yeah, we probably could have just said, like, can you explain Mr. Miracle? We could have just said, yeah, Darkseid is.
Mm-hmm. And going forward, that will be our official explanation for the story.
And Batman kills babies. Batman kills
babies. Yes,
and Darkseid is.
Those are the two things. I mean, like, I think it's gonna like struggle with Darkseid is, but so are we. And
yep, right.
Like, I think that's gonna be where I struggle with the most. Also, this has been a month of me reading with some existential dread comics or shows. So I feel like it's semi-cruel to do Mr. Miracle right after seeing Midnight Mass.
Which is also on my list. Haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. I can absolutely see actually the connective tissue between Midnight Mass and this, because it tackles very similar themes for sure. I didn't think about it until you literally just mentioned it now, and what a great parallel. Like, wow, I love it.
Speaking of, I
loved both of those very much.
I was in class and we were talking about, I actually was talking to a friend who had just finished Midnight Mass, and they had done the stupider thing of shotgunning it all the way to episode 6 and then going to bed on that.
Oh no.
And then finishing.
No.
But I was like, hey, did you see Haunting of Hill House? And he goes, no. And I said, Haunting of Hill House might be my favorite series in a decade. So get on that.
Yeah. And this was my favorite comic book series of a decade. So
all three. So it's Midnight Mass, Haunting of Hill House, and then there's another one, right?
Haunting of Bly Manor.
Yeah. All three are on our list. We started Haunting of Hill House. I think we watched 2 episodes and need to watch.
Oh God.
It's episode 3. It's really Mike Flanagan's signature. It's like episode 3 is where you've gotten to the top of the first lift hill on the roller coaster, and it all like goes from there.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So, and that's true of Midnight Mass. That's true of Hill House. It's true of Bly Manor.
Well, I mean, our friend John Hildebrand loved Midnight Mass, and he doesn't like anything. So
that's true.
That's so true. That's very true. It's very true. Although I do please him with Euro board games, he tends to like those.
True.
Yes.
He does
like things.
Yes,
he does like things. He's just very selective.
Yes,
very selective. Very selective. Well, thank you so much for doing this for me. This was a glorious. Yeah,
I'm going to. This is definitely one that's going to go in my bookshelf. Like I said, I did not read it before this. This was all Leia that it was on the list from Leia, and I'm glad that you chose it. And it was very apropos for our guest for JR, because theology and quite a bit of therapy involved in this, and philosophy, just all wrapped in. It was it was a treat. So I got to ask Jen, now that you've listened to this, and knowing that we have the digital copy, should I throw this on your iPad for you to flip through?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, JR, for joining us.
Excellent. Yeah, it's.
Oh, are you still there? Did everybody freeze?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm having
I'm
a good time.
Okay.
I just can sit really still on a Zoom call. I've learned it from years. I can look like I'm dead. People have often been like, "Did he freeze?" And I'm like, "I'm perfectly fine." Like, but you froze. Nope. I can sit really still on a Zoom call.
So whether or not this will be the order, I'm going to announce it anyway because I will just make it the order. Tune in 2 weeks when we do Marvel Noir. This is the first time that we're not going to do just one graphic novel. We're going to explain kind of a world by going through several different graphic novels, and we will have the lovely and talented Dan Schaefer with us, who we always have a good time with. So
Yes.
Until then, take it away, Vandello.
A little wreck conversation, some deep reactions, please. All this comics narration ain't elating me. A little more talk, a lot less read. A little fight, baby, is what I need. Close the trade, open up your brains. Explain it to me. Explain it to me, baby. Explain it to me. Explain it to me, baby. Explain it to me. Vandello 2021.